The special significance of a true work of art resides in the fact that it has escaped from the limitations of the personal and has soared beyond the personal concerns of its creator. Since the first motion picture by the French inventor Louis Le Prince in the year 1888, film directors have pushed the boundaries of ingenuity to transform storytelling into an art. The best films have left their mark on the world and have left a meaningful impact across generations. The power of film is expressed through themes and motifs that impact each and every one of us, both individually and collectively. In this video, we will take a closer look at the inner mechanisms screenplay writers use to attract audiences, and the effects such mechanisms can have on personal as well as collective beliefs. When asked to offer insight into how children experience movies, Jennifer Herriger, professor of developmental psychology at Pepperdine University, says the following: "Films often provide children with a framework from which to understand the world around them. Often the messages are subtle, but they are also pervasive. They learn from media, and their beliefs and value systems are, in part, shaped by the media. Children have a more difficult time deciphering reality from fantasy, and also lack the skills necessary to critically evaluate the messages presented to them via the media. Adults also struggle to critically evaluate the messages, as well as are likely to internalize beliefs from media sources, including movies." Before movie theaters became commonplace, the responsibility of shaping the cultural narrative lay in the hands of novelists, poets, and philosophers, whom through written works offered younger generations literary frameworks that helped them navigate and make sense of the world. After the popularization and cultural adoption of theaters, the cultural narrative shifted to the hands of leaders of the movie industry, an industry that, as Jacob R. Drucker from the Harvard Crimson writes, plays an active role in shaping our collective consciousness. In many respects, the movie industry is usurping written works as a primary means of spreading ideas and educating the public. Films do not merely entertain, they educate. The far greater reach of movies as a visual medium over text entices screenplay writers to create stories that are enjoyable, relatable, and most importantly, understandable by the widest demographic. To accomplish this, screenwriters employ the use of archetypes, which use myth as a universal language. Treating myth as a type of naturalized speech helps explain the circulation and recirculation of mythic heroes in popular culture. The meaning of myth emerges in social practice from the circulation of archetypes in media discourse, explained Sean Zender and Sandra Calvert in their 2004 study, Between the Hero and the Shadow, Developmental Differences in Adolescents' Perceptions and Understanding of Mythic Themes in Film. Myth is the practice of conveying the unexplainable, whether that be a natural phenomenon or a supernatural occurrence using symbolism of religious nature. To better understand myth, the structuralist approach of Claude Levi-Strauss suggests we read myth more or less as we would read an orchestral score, not stave after stave, but understanding that we should apprehend the whole page and understand that something which was written on the first stave, at the top of the page, acquires meaning only if one considers that it is part and parcel of what it is written below on the second stave, the third stave, and so on. That is, we have to read not only from left to right, but at the same time vertically, from top to bottom. We have to understand that each page is a totality, that it is only by treating the myth as if it were an orchestral score, written stave after stave, that we can understand it as a totality, that we can extract the meaning out of the myth. This holistic application of myth and the universality of its underlying meaning is nothing but a projection from the unconscious and not a conscious invention at all, writes Jung. It is quite understandable that we should everywhere come upon the same myth motifs, and that myths actually represent typical psychic phenomena. This versatility and frequency essential to myth has allowed it to prevail in social discourse till the present day. The transportation theory, as proposed by Melanie C. Green and Timothy C. Brock in their 2000 paper, The Role of Transportation in the Persuasiveness of Public Narratives, claims that when individuals are absorbed into a story or transported into a narrative world, they may show effects of the story on their real-world beliefs. Transportation allows the reader to transport to the world of the narrative. By doing so, there is an evident change in attitude that results in the work being perceived as more enjoyable. This phenomenon can make the viewer less critical of the work, as their attention is fully allocated onto the story and is less so available for scrutiny. In a 2011 study titled "A Story About a Stupid Person Can Make You Act Stupid: Behavioral Assimilation as Narrative Impact," It was reported that reading a story involving an intellectually challenged protagonist without any instructions before answering a series of questions led to lower test scores than if instructed to find differences between the self and the protagonist before the reading took place. This was hypothesized to be a function of assimilating character traits. In a way, by putting oneself in the shoes of the protagonist, not only are we judging the story less harshly, but we are taking on specific traits of the characters in the story. In their study, Green and Brock offer empirical support that transporting oneself into the world of the narrative present has an impactful effect on beliefs. By prior testing, participants were divided into two categories: those who rank high in transportability and those low in transportability. The participants in the high transportability group reported beliefs more consistent with those implied in the story than those in the latter group. This shows us that the more engaging work is, the easier it becomes to assimilate character traits and beliefs of the story at large. However, it is worth noting that transportability varies from person to person. What amounts to differences in transportability can be broken up into three different personality dimensions according to Mead: need for cognition, fantasy proneness, and empathy. Need for cognition is a measure describing how pleasurable an individual finds thinking to be. This measure was reported to be significant, meaning individuals who find joy in thinking, and those are properly stimulated intellectually by the narrative of a story, are more likely to experience transportability, and by succession, belief integration. Those high in fantasy proneness also rank high in transportability. Fantasy proneness is described by Mead as the ability to fantasize most of the day, and even experience fantasies through hallucinations, to be easily hypnotized, believed to have experienced paranormal encounters or have the ability to experience them, and to easily dissociate from a situation. Empathy is the third marker of transportability. Empathy, in this respect, is the ability to recognize emotion in others and experience it as your own. It is worth noting, extroversion, defined by how socially adept one is, was not a marker of transportability. Taking this into account, we could theorize extroversion could potentially reduce the long-lasting impact a story can have on personal beliefs. Transportability can be fully immersive. It has the power to transform, suspend, and alter audiences' beliefs. Differences in personality account for differences in transportability. Although not everyone is affected equally, it's important to understand that by the model of transportability, those who enjoy to think, have a predilection for fantasy, and are empathetic are more likely to integrate beliefs derived from story narratives into their lives. As a new era of film dawns, we must be conscious of the responsibilities storytellers have and their impact on society, particularly on the young, who, as American novelist Russell Banks notes, make up the largest single segment of the consumer economy, a segment worth over $1 trillion of the gross national product. As the spirit of engagement garners our attention, for it holds true that the aggregate of our stories become myth, our sense of meaning orientates us to these types of stories that endure in the hearts of men.